Hello friends, Commander, or as is commonly known as EDH, is one of the biggest formats in Magic the Gathering. It's also perhaps the most fun to play, as you can build decks of any power level and personalize every detail of your deck to you and your preferences. In this series, we're going to provide you with a step-by-step guide on how you can get started in the Commander format. And along the way, if you have any suggestions that might have worked for you that we didn't discuss, feel free to comment it below. With this being said, I do want to make a note that I will be proceeding with the assumption that you at least know how to play Magic, though I will try to keep things as accessible as I can. To begin, Commander is unlike any other Magic format. This is a multiplayer format, so you can have anywhere from 2 to 20 players. The general accepted notion is that the optimal number of players in a Commander game is 4, though you can play with as many as you can properly manage. Just keep in mind that the more people you have in a game, the longer that game might go on, so do get comfortable. Bring snacks. You also begin at 40 life, unlike other constructed formats where you begin at 20. It's also different in that you're playing with a deck built of exactly 100 cards. No more, no less. Of those 100 cards, you must have a card serve as your commander, who sits in their own zone from the deck called the command zone. Your commander is a legendary creature of your choosing, though there are some cards that can serve as your commander that aren't legendary creatures. Some Planeswalker cards have the text on them, "This card can be your commander," which makes them options for you to choose from as well. There are also some cards that have the keyword partner, which allows you to have 2 commanders so long as both of them have the partner keyword. There are also a handful of those partner cards that have specific partners, like Will and Rowan Kinrith. These can stand alone or in the partner pairing with the other card named. Having a creature as your commander brings a stipulation that you may choose to take advantage of while formulating your strategy. If any player takes at least 21 points of combat damage from a single commander, which can include their own, that player loses the game. This is called commander damage, and it's tracked separately from your life total and individually for each commander in the game. If the control of a commander changes, that number will remain intact. If your commander is destroyed, or exiled, or sent back to the deck, you can choose to move them back to the command zone where you can recast them later. For each additional time you recast your commander, you must pay 2 additional mana. So the first time you cast it, you may pay its mana cost and cast it. The second time, you pay 2 and its mana cost. Third time's the charm, you pay 4 mana and its mana cost, and so on. This is what's called a replacement effect, and it's specific to your commander. So if you have 2 commanders, each will have its additional cost tracked separately. Next, your deck building does have 2 very important limitations. Firstly, you may only include 1 copy of each card in your deck. This is not pertaining to basic lands, so you can include as many of them as you wish, but anything that is not a basic land, you can only run 1 copy of. Secondly, the cards that you choose must fit into what's called the color identity of your commander. A card's color identity is determined by the types of mana pips in its casting cost, as well as any mana symbols in that card's text box. So a card like Yeva, Nature's Herald, is considered mono-green, as she only contains green mana symbols. But a card like Chatterfang Squirrel General has a green mana in his casting cost and a black mana in his activated abilities cost, giving him a green and black identity. A card like Ravenous Squirrel has what's called a hybrid mana symbol, which means both colors are taken into consideration, making it too a green and black card. You would not be able to add the Ravenous Squirrel to your Yeva deck because it has black in its casting cost. Now, a card that has reminder text, such as Blind Obedience, can be tricky. It has hybrid mana symbol in its reminder text for the extort mechanic, but because reminder text does not influence color identity, it allows you to include Blind Obedience in a mono white deck, or just a deck that does not contain black. If that sounds confusing, imagine this. Reminder text oftentimes gets printed on the first iteration of the mechanic, and then does not show up on the subsequent printings of the cards, most times. And so if a card with Extort is to be printed without reminder text, that mana pip would not appear in the card's text box. There are also some double-faced cards that need discussing. Some cards have different colored backs, such as the Elusive Tormentor. The front face of this card only has black mana symbols, but when it's transformed into Insidious Mist, it takes on a blue color identity, which is indicated by the little circle in the left corner of the name box. As such, you would have to include this card into a deck containing both of these colors in order to use it. If a card simply mentions a color by name and no mana symbols are present, then it does not gain that color identity. Sling Gang Lieutenant is a great example of this. It creates 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, but because it does not have any of those pips on the card, its identity is still mono black. From there, you are free to build your commander deck however you want. Commander is what's called an eternal format, meaning once a card is printed, it's legal in Commander forever, so you don't have to worry about your beloved deck rotating out like you do in Standard. You have the entire back catalog of Magic cards to pick from Alpha to now. There is a small list of banned cards that cannot be used in the formats, and new bannings are rather rare. So once you put together your dream deck, you could, in theory, have that deck forever. One of the best things about Commander is because games take longer to close out, and because you'll have access to much more mana than you would in something like Modern, you can include some of the spells that have higher mana costs. A card like Stormhurt, which costs a staggering 10 mana, might seem impossible to use in a 60 card format, but in Commander, it can help set you up to win the game. For some Commander players, big, impactful spells can be exciting and something to build your deck around. Some decks seek to fire off a devastating combo, such as getting the card Omniscience into play, and then casting the spell Enter the Infinite, which lets you draw your entire deck, and then because Omniscience is in play, you get to cast all of your spells for free. Even others want to create an army of tokens to overrun your opponents, such as Tristani Selesnya's Voice. You can pick your favorite creature type and then build a commander deck that uses just those creatures and the cards that support those creature types, like building a dinosaur deck with Gishath. And of course, if none of that interests you, you can always build Krenko and pummel your opponents by flinging goblins at them. Your commander deck is really just representative of you and your tastes and your play styles. You can pick a commander that appeals to you visually or mechanically and go from there. If you have a strategy that you want to build a deck for, or a pet card that you really enjoy, there is very likely a commander that will be able to fill that role and give you an option for a deck to build. And in future parts of this series, we will discuss some methods for you to find the cards to use. Some commanders do have their concepts for their respective decks pretty clearly cut based on their individual abilities, and others are rather open-ended, giving you the freedom to build them however you want. In the next part, we're going to discuss how to go about acquiring your first commander deck. But for now, that will wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed this first part in the series, and I hope you'll stay tuned for future parts. Likes and shares are always greatly appreciated, they help expand the audience. If you're new, hit subscribe to keep up to date with everything going on, and as always, I'll catch you all in the next video.